welcome to our next episode of Future Focus CXOs. I have a very special guest today. He has industry experience across multiple industries. So I'm very excited to talk with him. So without any further delay, let me welcome Rob Zelinka on the call. He is the CIO of Jack Henry and Associates. Do you mind giving a brief introduction about yourself, and then we can jump into the questions? We have a lot of them for you today.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Happy to join you today. What an honor. So my name is Rob Zelinka. I am the CIO of Jack Henry. I have been working in some form of technology leadership for over 30 years now. I didn't quite plan my career to path that way, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I have traveled here and there over the course of those 30 years, calling various places on the globe home.
Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Steve.
So you've got a very diverse background, although the job role seems to be similar, but your industry experience is all over the place: healthcare, financial services, law, that kind of thing. What are some of the most valuable lessons and skills you've gained from this diversity of experience, and how has that influenced your approach as a CIO?
Thanks for the question, Steve. So, my passion is people, and I am at the intersection of people and technology and have been for 30 years. So 30 years ago, the inflection point was this new thing called the internet. It was exciting, it was scary, it was confusing, and I just happened to be fascinated by it. And I saw an opportunity to use technology to help enable a human to do a job, a human to be more efficient, a human to connect with another human on a different level. So the earlier stages of my career were basically teaching people how to use a computer. The average desk in late 1990 was filled with a typewriter, a printer, dot matrix printer, nonetheless, that loud device kept going back.
Card.
Yeah, exactly, Jay. Candidly, and no judgment here, it almost always included an ashtray for those cigarette smokers that were able to smoke in the office, in the workplace, and usually a green screen or amber screen device called a dumb terminal that connected to some big back-end server, whether that was a digital VAX, whether it was a mainframe, an AS400, it was some big computer. I happen to be fascinated with how a computer running Lotus 123, WordPerfect. I'm dating myself. And for those of you that are watching that are 20 years younger than I am, you probably have no idea what these things are. But those were the first generation of computerized apps that were going to help us do our job in an automated fashion. So that was my first inflection point. At that time, I was working for a software company, and it was really exciting. Our software was written to support healthcare entities, specifically hospitals, clinics, doctors. And I will tell you, at that point, I really enjoyed what I was doing. Towards the back end of that job, and I was with that company for 7 years, almost as long as I am working at Jack Henry. So the front end and now the back end of my career are bookends with the longest tenures in my career. But back when I started, there was this big event that everyone was excited about, anxious about. It was called Y2K, and you might remember. We had no idea happen. We didn't know whether the lights were going to come on January 1st, 2000, whether the heat was going to come on in our homes, whether the gas was going to flow from the gas pumps. I mean, it was a really scary event. And my team and I worked countless days, nights, weeks, protecting against the unknown. And ultimately, it was a big nothing for us. And that was the first time I coined this phrase called a nothing burger. So I'm glad it was a nothing burger because no one wanted to live out the worst case scenarios that we were hearing.
Well, let me ask you. So, when you went through Y2K, I remember Y2K, and I had to show up at early in the morning at my job to run a bunch of tests, to do all the things to see if the world had fallen apart. And I remember that, like, wow, there's nothing new. That's great. Like, we're all home by 10 a.m. But what kind of lessons did that kind of set into your career when you're like, okay, we did a whole lot of work from a technical perspective. There was a whole lot of fear, a whole lot of business concern, risk and everything. All could be legitimate, can't. It's an unknown. What kind of lessons did you learn from that?
It was foundational for my entire career. It taught me that you can never do enough planning. You can never have enough good documentation. That's where I learned to create run books, procedures. Sometimes the most mundane things that we do every day, we forget, especially during chaotic times or something that distracts us. Those were the biggest lessons, Steve, that I learned at that juncture of my career.
Very cool. And then today, how is that helping you as a CIO? So the idea that good planning, good documentation, all of the things, you're doing it in different things now. It's not typed up on a dot matrix printer. It's now in Confluence or some other form. So how is that influencing your approach?
Well, it's still foundational. In order to show good operational rigor, I refer to it as operational hygiene. Every day, most of us get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we shower, we get ready for our day. And in the same way, from an operations perspective, you go through a checklist of things. If you've ever watched an airline pilot do their job, they are very precise. They have a checklist. It used to be on a piece of paper and a clipboard. Now it's on an iPad. But each of the two pilots go through with painstaking approach every checkbox along the way. If they can't check that box, the plane does not take off. In the same way, when you look at operational rigor, you have to be able to be resilient against failures. You have to be able to address a failure when it occurs. And those foundational things that I learned about documentation, about communicating and collaborating, all are still in play today for my team and I. We have thousands of servers, hundreds of thousands actually, when you look at virtualized workloads, containerized workloads, that are all running, supporting our clients, the communities that those clients serve, that we collectively serve together. Frankly, there's no time for downtime in the financial services realm. Thinking of yourselves right now today. You're out and about enjoying the holiday season. You might enjoy a dinner with friends and family, maybe a cocktail at a bar. You might go shopping for a loved one. Imagine what would happen if payments weren't processing. It would be chaotic.
My weekend
Oh
would have
my
been a
God.
lot different this year, I tell you what.
And we take that very seriously. So operational rigor is extremely important. The mundane things that you get no bonus points for, you got to do perfectly. And you've got to do perfectly every time. You have to keep learning because what worked for you today may not work for you tomorrow.
Great. So I want to come back to your inflation points. And you spoke about a couple of them, right? Internet was one, Y2K. You also spoke about 2003, post 9/11.
Yeah.
Then another one was financial crisis, right, of 2018, pandemic that hit us in 2019. So a lot of inflation points you have gone through. And you always talk about technology and how to use technology to enhance human experience. I believe we are at a inflation point of AI, right? Especially with ChatGPT, Gen AI, because AI has been there, it's not new, but the technology is not perfect. It is evolving, it's not accurate. And this is where the real core challenge is for all industries or any of our customers to talk about, saying that now what do I do about this AI and how do I prepare myself to really roll out AI solutions? With your understanding and experience of these inflection points, how would you address this?
It occurred to me as we were talking, I was talking with some of my peers about AI and in particular how we were going to manage and govern AI and its usage, not just across our company, but across our industry for our clients. The approach we're taking is a boldly but responsible path. And let me elaborate a little bit on that. This inflection point with AI, it's exciting. There's technology that will enable the human to human interaction. So think of it this way. If you're on a contact center or call desk and all you do is receive calls, you want to have access to the right data as quickly as possible. So, Jay, let's say you were to call me up. I answered your call. I was an employee of the call center, and you said, Rob, I believe my credit card was compromised over the weekend. I want to have as much information possible, accurate information that first shows I understand. Secondly, shows I'm empathetic. You're nervous. This is causing you stress. So I'm trying to calm you, to assure you I'm here to help you manage the right outcome. But I need the right data. I need to know information that first validates that Jay is who Jay says he is, that it's not Steve purporting to be for the purposes of doing bad things. We have to blend doing things consistently, securely, with doing them faster, doing them accurately. And so that's where the governance comes in. And that's where these inflection points, when I reflected back, I said to myself, what we're dealing with here with AI, while different, foundationally, it's not much different than when we were deploying PCs, when we were deploying iPhones. So do you remember when the first iPhone came out and Steve Jobs stood up on stage and he made a call from one end of the stage to the other end of the stage? Now, what most people don't know is those two phones could only communicate with each other and nothing else to ensure that they worked, because no one wanted the same moment that occurred years before when Bill Gates was up on stage and proudly announcing Windows, and the machine crashed on stage in front of everyone. And here's where these inflection points create a reflection for me on those foundational elements that have driven my success, my team's success, year over year, decade after decade, technology trend after technology trend. For me, it always starts with the human. Understand the human. Secondly, then you have to put some guardrails up. You have to have some rails that are going to provide the governance, the structure that you're going to operate in. So going back to my boldly and responsible comment, there are dozens, probably hundreds of different AI tools out there that any human can use, and they're exciting. However, if you're a company, you have to ask yourself, how do I ensure that sensitive data that is our company's data, or the client of our company, or maybe even the client of our client, how is that data protected? How do we ensure that sensitive data doesn't end in the larger internet and the larger language model in this instance? And then know that we have some indemnity. By chance, it does end up somewhere where it doesn't, and invariably, sometimes that happens. We have some recourse as a company. And in our industry, and I would say in any industry, critically important. So back to your question, Steve, I've worked in healthcare entities, I've worked with law firms. The businesses are different, but the foundations are the same. You're serving people in some way, shape, or form. You have to have good structure, governance, compliance to ensure you're following the documented process, no matter whether you work at a bank, whether you work at a hospital, whether you work at a law firm. Foundationally, you have to earn the trust of the person you're supporting. If you don't have their trust, they will not ask you to support them. So that's how really I've been able to learn about these different industries, learn about the user and their experience, the personas of those users, and I'm using those foundational components that I learned 30 years ago still today.
What I heard is there is a lot of time between these inflection points. And one that might come closest is when the smartphones came up, people wanted to use them. And there was a big problem of bring your own device. Do I want your device to be connected to my network? Or should I give you a device? Some companies, big companies said, oh, there are two phones now. You use this for office, you use this for personal. Not everybody could afford that. So obviously, bring your own device concept came to picture, and there was a lot of governance that was put onto them. I believe the AI tools that you spoke about warrant something very similar, because today I can actually go to any AI site and use it for getting my work done. But in the process, I'm actually giving your company information to them. Get me a PPT or get me some insights, right? And how do you protect that? So I think more importantly, you said there has to be a governance and recourse. There, you should understand humans. But my follow-up question would be, how do you really not stop people from using it? Because that's not happening. People are going to use, right? But make the usage secure so that you have some recourse, you have some governance, you have some guidelines.
So once cell phone technology became consistent, reliable, it was deployed mainstream. And so how many of us have carried two phones? The company issues us a phone, we have our own phone. So the value of two phones is you have compartmentalization. So you have personal data over here and company or sensitive data over here. You might have sensitive data over here, but the point is you have two different devices that are wall gardened off. Okay. The drawback of that approach is it's two devices that have to be charged, two devices that have to be carried. And if you need data that's on this device over here, I mean, how many times have we emailed ourselves a file from one
Oh yeah.
account to another? It's the old-fashioned way. So another benefit that a company gets out of managing the device is it's their device. They can set the rules for the device. They can say what can go on the device, what cannot go on the device. They can monitor it, log it, audit it, track it, everything. So now on the bring your own device, so it's appealing to a lot of people. Hey, I can have one device. However, you have to have some rigor and some governance around it. So for example, Jay, you go out and you buy your own iPhone and you're really excited. You just bought the brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max and it has a nice camera and there's lots of storage. Your whole life is on that device. Pictures of your family, your banking account. You're willing to use it for work. And you might even be willing to use it for work without being asked for us to pay for some of it. But here's what we need to do. While we appreciate that we won't have to buy you a phone anymore, we have to establish some process between you and the company. So Jay, I'm going to ask you to sign off on essentially a contract between the company and you that allows us to put a container on your phone. That container will be a virtual container. Within that container will be company data, sensitive data, your email, your Teams, Zoom chats, Slack channels, all the things that are sensitive. And even though it's on your device that you own, that you're paying for, the data in that container cannot leak outside of that container. So for example, you can't send a picture from your personal phone to the container. You could if it was set up properly, but most times it's very rigidly locked down for audit and compliance, and especially in a heavily regulated industry like financial services. Well, you might say at the end of the day, if you're not going to compensate me for using my phone, then I'm not going to let you do that because it's my phone. And that's the challenge when you look that any company has. There's a balance of convenience, security, efficiency. And the way we approach this with cell phones, smartphones, is essentially the same way that we've done with AI. You're not going to stop people from using AI. You're absolutely right. Here's what I found in my career. The organizations, when I started in my career, we were what I called the Department of No. It reminded me of my parents when I was a young kid. My parents would make dinner, and let's say dinner was broccoli and fish and rice. I didn't want broccoli and I really didn't want fish. My parents didn't go out and make me another meal. They told me, this is dinner, you will eat it and you will like it. And in the same way, IT leaders did the same thing. This is our device. This is how you'll use it. You will like it. Well, here's what I learned. People who didn't like it, they went and worked somewhere else. And you lost really smart people. Or there was even a handful of people that would find ways to circumvent you just for sport, just to show that they could. When you're a technology company like Jack Henry, everyone is a technologist. And so I want to empower those people to help us to do our job better, to provide the best user experience as possible. So there has to be some balance. Well, the way you do that is you create these governance committees that help you establish those rails, the framework, how you're going to use a smartphone, how you're going to use AI, for instance, how you're going to track and manage data.
Jay, I got to interject on that in the fact that as a non-technologist growing up in the financial industry, I remember all of these two phones, trying to lock down my phone, all of the things that had to be done. And the Department of No, which is also at some point in when the financial crisis was the underwriting team. What was interesting about that is, my user experience was being crafted by my sport with which I was going to adopt or circumvent a no in order to get the job done that I was being asked to do, instead of being limited by. It was really interesting that a lot of times, like, the user experience, while it looks like they're rebelling, is actually what's probably the most efficient way. There should be a way to meet that process with good technology security and compliance, and in finding that balance. Now, granted, that it's not perfect, but you may not get to the moon, but you'll certainly get into space, right? And so you're like, how do we find that blend? There's a real element there to the user experience and how, especially in each generation, and I'm sure, Rob, you've seen this as well, how younger generations just have a higher expectation that things work together
And
and should be easy.
they're
Yeah.
not wrong, Steve,
Yeah.
to have a
They're
higher
not
expectation.
wrong.
It's making us better. It's making us stronger because they're challenging us to get out of our comfort zone, and they're pushing us into areas that make us uncomfortable for the purposes of getting better. I think about the industries. So, various industries approach security differently, approach compliance differently. As I indicated earlier, if you're in a heavily regulated industry that's audited by regulators and consistently audited, you have to make sure that you have a good playbook for how you're managing risk, but more importantly, you have evidence to show how you're managing risk. You are bringing the data, the documentation that shows a regulator, yep, this is our process, this is our policy, and those two are happening with consistency. And go through, take a random sampling of our data, and you'll see for yourself. That's how you pass rigor with the regulators. Almost every business in some way, shape, or form is regulated. So think of it this way. There's that 55-inch TV that you got to have. It's $200. It's a Black Friday special, and you want to pay for it with probably a credit card. Well, there's a heavy amount of regulation that's happening right there because you're using a credit card. And so you, as a consumer carrying a credit card, may not think about it, but I promise you, someone at Best Buy is thinking about, are they passing muster? Are they safely and securely taking digital transactions from a credit card safely, efficiently? Are they preventing fraud? One of the last things you'll ever want to do is call the number on the back of your credit card to report your card is lost or stolen and you're worried about fraudulent usage.
You said it very excellently, saying that as we allowed the phones to come in, they are not perfect still. Similarly, it cannot be a no department for AI, right? They will have to allow AI usage for the employees. What I heard from you, there are three things they should be doing. One, provide the AI tools, saying that use these AI tools, right? Second, put some guidelines to it, do's and don'ts, so that people know, okay, I'm securely using it. And third, put some level of back-end controls to prevent the fraud. Like, for example, the trust layer that everybody talks about, saying that I need a trust layer so my data doesn't flow through. Something like that they need to do. So what in nutshell you're saying is, you do these three things, you can actually pass through this inflation point very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the interesting thing. We are at the very early stages of AI from a maturity perspective. So this is going to move and evolve and shift. And that's another lesson that I didn't mention earlier, Steve, when you asked me about some of the things that have helped me to be successful. You have to maintain some level of perspective, okay? Things are going to evolve and change from where they are today. And you have to evolve and change with them, and preferably ahead of the curve. Because if you're behind the curve or chasing up, you almost always get left behind. How many more times do we have to review what happened at Blockbuster Video? They were behind the curve. That's not a position you want to be in. You really want to be ahead of the curve. You have to be flexible. You have to know that things are going to change. You have to be able to keep up with the pace of change. You have to hire incredibly smart people and get out of their way. Let them be part of a collaborative process to help you solve real problems that are facing your business. Again, let's go back to the cell phone. So if I say to you, Jay, you can use your cell phone for company work, and you send an email inappropriately to 1,000 people. I can't say, oh yeah, well that Jay sent that on his own phone. No, he sent it from a company issued email address. I have ownership. I have accountability there. In the same way, if Jay is using a sponsored AI tool and you use it inappropriately and it puts a customer of ours at risk, I can't say, yep, Jay used a tool inappropriately, we're exonerated from that. Or better yet, I can't say, yep, no, it wasn't us, it was the large language model. Nope, because it's our tool, we're using it. It's hard. It's a real hard balance because bold suggests you're doing something different from everybody else. Perhaps even has a little more risk than you're used to or comfortable with. Responsibly means you're doing it with vigilance, at the right pace to ensure you're managing risk and any of the outcomes. And let's face it, I think we're still not 100% confident in what the outcomes will be, good or bad. I mean, right now it's exciting to be able to ask a large language model to produce a picture of a cat and a dog playing instruments. And it's funny, kids love it. But when you start getting into real things like, hey, run a query for me and show me the top 100 clients that are most likely to perpetrate fraud, for example, you want to make sure that information is accurate, because if you're going to use that information to make business decisions, you want to make sure you're making the right business decisions. And I think this is where the technology is still evolving. We're still learning about it. So we're in the education phase, we're in the pilot phase, the proof of concept phase. And I expect that by this time next year, we will have several really good stories to show our clients, our industry, how we're using AI to drive an outcome that we've established, whether that's an improved user experience, reduced cost structure, reduced risk structure, just simply getting access to data quicker. No shortage of opportunity.
Honestly, I'm just enjoying this so much. One question I want to ask you is, if you look at AI today, right, there are really only two options companies have. They do it themselves, do it yourself by taking all these tools, or you adopt some kind of platform, whether it is Oracle or Salesforce or Microsoft or Google.
Sure.
Now, the question is, how do you see actually these companies? Because as you very rightly said, if I'm going to use Copilot, Microsoft has a lot of responsibility onto it. And recently, what happened with Copilot of releasing some email addresses of their company was not really good. So people are scared about these two. They don't control it, they don't own it. So what I'm trying to ask is, with this growing influence of AI on companies, and they are forced to do it because everybody has been asked, what's your AI strategy? Right? And all CXOs are really struggling with it. With your bold and responsible approach, how do you see these companies like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Google, Amazon progressing into these phases? And what are the typical trends and points we should see with these companies to say that, oh, this company seems to be
the first step? Foundationally, for me, it always starts with people. So think of the user experience, the employee experience. Whether you consume someone else's platform, Microsoft's, Google's, Facebook's, or you build your own, build a team of people that understand what problems you're trying to solve, and have a team of people that understand the compliance aspect, the risk management aspect, have a team that is versed and skilled in user experience so that the experience, and if you want to do that building on your own technology and in your own private large language model, fantastic. If you want to use someone else's, that's fine too. But foundationally, you need the right people. Now, you've mentioned companies like Salesforce, ServiceNow, Oracle. I can go on. There's no shortage of companies that I think right now are really using this as a, for lack of a better word, a marketing opportunity. Okay, imagine selling a software as a service platform without any reference to AI in this world today. We're behind that curve. Remember, you want to be ahead of that curve. We're behind. So what's happening though is a lot of these companies are believing that they can monetize this AI on top of the platform. So let's say I'm a consumer of Salesforce and I buy the base platform for Sales Cloud, Service Cloud. Salesforce would love to be able to uplift their revenue with selling me their AI technology. Well, we live in a world where we have many systems of record. I mentioned just two of them. Jack Henry is heavily invested in both ServiceNow and Salesforce, just as we are in Google. So we have many systems of record that have to be integrated. And that's where this AI model over here from company A may not have the same outcome and effect with company B's solution or company C's solution. So you may be better served by saying no to the AI that is in Salesforce and or ServiceNow and going with Google's, which is kind of agnostic. And now you can use their technology across all of the various platforms that you're seeking to use and develop and ultimately builds experiences on. But again, I think the thing that you have to take into context is the problems you're solving today may evolve and change over time. And certainly the technology is going to evolve and change over time. We talked a little while back about data lake technology. Remember how data lake technology is going to save us from ourselves, basically? You would take all data, no matter where it was coming from, and dump the data lake. Well, here's the problem. The data lake became a data swamp. Why? Because there was no governance around the data. There was no stewardship in the data. There was no cleaning of the data, sanitizing of it. And so you would end up with this huge body of data. And again, think of that customer experience. You're calling to report fraud on your credit card. Your anxiety level is already up. You want someone that's going to answer the phone quickly, that's going to understand your problem, that's going to show you some empathy and understanding and get you to a better place as fast as possible. Well, in the data realm, you need to have access to the right data at the right time as quickly as possible. That's where AI will help here.
Absolutely. I think a lot has to be learned as we go through this AI adoption. But as you said, if you have a right set of people, foundational to anything, we can address those challenges. Because every platform, everything, whatever you do has some risk associated with it. And since it's a new technology, the risk is high. That risk becoming an issue is high probability. So that is, I think, what in a nutshell you're saying, whether you do it yourself, if you have money, do it yourself, your own LLM model, or go with some of these technologies. One sidebar onto that is, whole of last year, I was also thinking the same way, Rob, that as a CEO, what do I do in AI? Because tomorrow, if I don't say AI on my website, I'm already dated gone behind the curve, right? Yeah. But it's such a new technology. So I don't want to say something about AI which is not true or which I'm not doing, because that's also not doing justice to my customers. Whole year went through until we are a Salesforce company, so until Dreamforce. But when I really understood what Salesforce could do in Dreamforce and come up with their agents, I realized that what problem you said, that also they have solved, saying that if the data is not everything within their system, and you don't want to copy the data because it is massive data to copy, how do you solve that problem? Yeah. So I think I got a way of what I want to do, but I really want to put some executive briefing in place to talk about these things, saying that what options you have, what you can do, and which problem it is there. But you are right. It is a space to be watched, a space to learn, a space to evaluate.
And here's the good news. The technology today, so I guess as a CEO, I would ask you, what percentage of accuracy do you think the average language model has in today's realm?
You mean the ones in production?
60%?
Yeah.
Maybe around 60%.
60, okay. Let's say it was 90%. One of my hobbies and passions is travel. And I really love to watch airplanes and learn about how they take off. Would you get on an airplane that landed 60% of the time successfully?
No.
Okay. Let's say
even 90% I won't get on that airplane.
Okay. Exactly. Okay. And that's where we're at right now with this, because you want it as close to 100% as possible. I believe that the technology's there to get us close to that. Will it ever be 100%? It won't. But there's the threshold. And every company has to basically ask themselves, what is their risk tolerance? It might be dependent on industry, the advisement from the board of directors or the leadership team. You've said, I won't get on an airplane that doesn't successfully land even 90% of the time. But some other people may. Someone asked me a while back, this is kind of funny, so bear with me. So someone asked me, if there was a bowl of jelly beans and there was 100 jelly beans in the bowl, but 5 of the 100 were poisonous and they would kill you, would you eat them? And I said, well, it depends on how hungry I was. And they kind of laughed. Okay, so you have to put yourself of what problem are you trying to solve? What is the risk tolerance for your company, your board, even your customer that you're serving? If I'm an airline, here's what I know today, Jay. I can't come to you and say, Jay, I land the plane 60% of the time. Please come on board. You will not. If I even say, hey, I've improved, Jay, it's 3 months from now, I'm at 90% now, you still won't get on my airplane.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'll tell you one similar knowledge because you love this aeroplane thing. Well, I was talking to one of the pilot, my friend. He says, autopilot technology in aeroplanes is very good, super good. But still, when it comes to landing, we are being asked to switch it off because humans can perform better, adapt better in a scenario where reaction time is like in fractions, you know?
Yeah,
So,
Jay, go back to Captain Sully. The
Yeah.
computer said that the plane couldn't land. The
oh, yeah.
human
Oh, yeah.
landed the plane. Now, was it pretty? It was not. No one wants to land in a body of water. But here's the most important takeaway. Every single person on that airplane lived to tell the story. And
Oh, yeah.
Captain Sully is legendary. He went through a whole lot in between now and then because
He
people
went through a
questioned.
compliance audit. That's what he did. He
Absolutely,
had a
right?
really
There you
detailed
go.
compliance audit, and then they're like, "Oh, look at that. He was right."
When you crash a multi-million-dollar plane, that tends to get on people's radars, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, one last question. We ask this of every CXO. What advice would you give with someone on becoming a CXO, particularly regarding embracing change and leveraging technology?
Yeah, so never stop learning. Give yourself some grace. You're going to plot out your journey. And I promise you, it's not going to go perfect. There's going to be detours along the way. And some of those detours will be good for your career, and maybe some of those not as good, but you're going to learn from them. So never stop learning. Apply what you're learning for growth, because that's how you get better. And the last thing I would say is surround yourself with great people. If you are the smartest person in the room, or you think you're the smartest person in the room, find
Yeah, it's
another
a
room.
problem. A problem.
Get with people that are smarter than you and get out of their way. Let them challenge you, learn from them. I do this still today. I manage quite a few people, and I know I'm not the smartest person in the room, and they know I'm the last person that they want behind a keyboard coding or doing routing configuration. But
Yeah.
together, we're an exceptional team.
Great
Excellent.
advice. Thank you so much, Rob. It was very inspirational talking to you. I learned a lot today about how do we navigate not just this inflection point, but 10 more to come in our life, I believe, before we retire. So, any last words before we sign off?
I just want to say how much I appreciate the story, the time with you and Steve to share our story. Jack Henry, we're really passionate about serving people, serving our communities, and we think we're doing something really, really special there. So thanks for the opportunity to let me share a little bit about what we're doing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely.